Welcome to the Vantage Fit Corporate Wellness Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Vantage Fit, the all-in-one AI-powered corporate wellness platform developed by Vantage Circle.
Physical health is all we were worried about in the past, but with time, everything is changing. Now people are slowly understanding the relevance of mental wellness as well. And it is significant in the workplace as leaders set the goals and expectations that all the employees have to live up to. So as we talk about mental well-being in the workplace, we have to focus mainly on the leaders because at the end of the day, it's them who the entire workplace looks up to. So today we will discuss more on the topic of mental health and its relevance in the workplace with respect to leadership. Let's discuss further on this on today's episode of Vantage Fit. I am your host 𝙪𝙤𝙚𝙚, and I have with me Swagata Bapat, an executive coach and facilitator with over 30 years of experience in mental health and well-being. Her work is focused on unlocking potential in individual leaders and leadership teams. Swagata brings to her coaching a deep knowledge and understanding of human behavior and team dynamics. She has consulted to leading mental health and well-being organizations in Australia and has provided consultation to many state and federal government departments. Welcome to the show, Swagata.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me.
Really glad to have you here, Swagata. So let us move to the first question, which is, so tell me about your journey in the spectrum of mental health and well-being.
Sure. So I've been working in the mental health and wellbeing space for over 30 years now. And I think you could probably divide my career roughly into 10, 10 and 10. I started off working as a clinician in mental health services, both here in Australia and in the UK, and working with people with mental illness and with mental health issues and providing therapeutic treatment to them, supporting them and their families. And then in the second and third parts of my career, I've worked in policy development, service development, and particularly worked in the area of building skills and knowledge and building the ability of the workforce to support mental health and wellbeing. I've also worked in the organisational development and leadership development space, but the consistent thread through my career has really been around being very passionate about optimising mental health and wellbeing in whatever settings I'm working in. I think that's been an incredibly important part of the work that I've done.
Okay, so just like as you mentioned that you have worked over 30 years in this area, right? So tell me something, how much importance have you seen people giving to mental health?
Yeah, look, it's really interesting. I think these days people give it a lot of importance in that people across the board really understand that it's a critical foundation for leading a meaningful and productive life, not just a meaningful and productive work life, but also a productive and meaningful, happy personal life. And when I reflect on 30 years ago when I first started working in this field, there was much less awareness of mental health and its importance. As you said in your introduction, much more of a focus on physical health and well-being. And I have, seen over the years the greater awareness that people in the public have been developing in relation to the importance of good mental health and well-being. And certainly in my work now as an executive coach and facilitator and consultant, I do have a primary focus in my conversations with leaders around the importance of promoting mental health and wellbeing, both for themselves, but also for their team and in their organisation and workplace. So it's certainly changed a lot over the last 30 years.
Yes, exactly. I mean, the entire take on mental health has indeed seen a lot of changes over the past couple of years, especially with pandemic in the scene. Don't you think awareness has also increased in recent times? Because the concept of mental health, for example, like a decade ago, was not as prominent as it is now, right? So what do you have to say about that?
Sure, absolutely. Look, I think the last 2 years have thrown up extraordinary challenges for people with COVID. I'm certainly noticing a much greater focus on the importance of mental health and the impacts of COVID on people's and communities' mental health and wellbeing. So, COVID has brought with it incredible uncertainty For some people, isolation, loss of connection, a number of people are experiencing significant grief and loss, anxiety. In workplaces, people and leaders have had to deal with just constant change and having to adapt very quickly, and working with and managing remote teams. So what I've noticed, so I've been consulting for 4.5 years now, is that many organisations have been reaching out to me in the last couple of years to understand how they can better support the mental health and wellbeing of their workforce. And in my coaching, there's a very strong theme as a result of the impact of the pandemic on how to support and promote your own mental health and wellbeing as a leader.
Yes, even I think like with work from home, many people have, like just like you mentioned, like social isolation. Some people have developed anxiety and depression. So managing these remote teams has been really difficult for the leaders, I guess. So I think since the leaders were also working from home, right? So I guess it has been really troublesome for them to manage the entire company. So, what are the challenges leaders face in promoting and maintaining their own mental health and well-being and that of their teams?
Sure. I just wanted to make another comment too, Dipsha, when you're talking about the remote teams. The other thing that leaders are having to manage very much more so now is just that transition and the hybrid workforce. So you have a number of people who are back in the offices and people who are not. And then the other element, particularly in the service sector, is how do you support people who have to be in the workplace despite the risks and the impact of the pandemic? So frontline healthcare workers, people in service delivery roles, and people who are in customer-facing roles. So that's also another issue that has brought mental health and wellbeing to the fore for leadership.
Yes.
And so I just wanted to add that in.
And I think when people are working from their homes, the communication also there's a communication gap also between the teams, right? So it gets very difficult, I think, to communicate over like Skype or Zoom all the time because we're not physically meeting each other.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, you're spot on. Absolutely. And
that's
a big impact.
Yeah, so talking about like mental wellness, so do you think corporates in today's world know the significance of mental health of their employees and of the managers of themselves?
Yeah, I might go back, if it's okay with you, and just answer the question around challenges that leaders are facing in promoting mental health and wellbeing and their teams. And then if you're happy with that, then I'll talk a little bit more about, corporates and that question. Because I think it's really important for leaders. So when you think about the context, particularly of the last couple of years, you have a huge challenge in terms of leading in ongoing uncertainty with a lot of unknowns. So leaders having to take up and absorb information really quickly and change their approach and the communication to their teams and how they're working with their teams very quickly, depending on new information as it comes through across the period of the pandemic. As we talked about, leaders having the challenge of supporting their staff working remotely and then having to make decisions in the context of a number of new risks being presented by COVID, with not always perfect information in front of them. So whilst they're doing that, they're having to ensure that their staff are supported, but that they're still driving outcomes. And for a number of the leaders that I'm working with, they have global workforces and national workforces. We're all impacted very differently by different government mandates and requirements and different local environments. So that has been incredibly challenging for leaders. In terms of the coaching, some of the themes that I've noticed for leaders is in terms of promoting their mental health and wellbeing has been how on earth, in the midst of all of these things that they're trying to manage, do they prioritise their mental health and wellbeing And many leaders will talk about having enough time. And some of the work that we do in coaching is around the sort of strategies they can put in place for prioritising their own mental health and well-being, how to stop and take time for reflection and self-care, and a really big one around how to set and keep boundaries when there's so much that needs to be done, so boundaries on time and availability. And that really tricky balance, I think, for leaders around people who are naturally driven to serve and look after other people. So that balance between giving to others and looking after themselves. So I think all of those challenges impact on leaders. And in terms of the question you were asking about teams, some of the challenges I've noticed around mental health and wellbeing is that point with remote teams and people in different locations. How do you connect people to each other? And social connection is so important for mental health and wellbeing. And how do you connect people who are working outside of the office to the work and the mission of the organisation? The other issue has been for some leaders in terms of managing wellbeing for their teams is finding the right balance between managing performance with ensuring that staff are actually supported to maintain their mental health and wellbeing, and also how to put meaningful strategies in place and not things that might be received by your team or your workforce as, tokenistic or a tick box exercise around mental health and wellbeing. So, they're some of the significant challenges that I hear from leaders and from teams around mental health and wellbeing and how to promote them.
Yes, challenges are no less, and that is why we need effective solutions to cope up with those challenges. Which brings me to the question that, do you think that corporates actually understand the relevance of mental health, or they are just considering it for the namesake?
I can just answer that in a word, yes. I think corporates in today's world absolutely know the significance of mental health and wellbeing, and I'm really heartened to see how much work and commitment organisations, corporates, all sorts of shapes and sizes of organisations, how much effort they're putting into trying to promote mental health and wellbeing, both in the workplace and in their local communities.
Yeah, I guess that's why we have seen many corporates they are giving counseling sessions to their employees, so that they people who are struggling with their mental health can come out of it and express it openly, right? Sure. So I also think that employers these days do know what their employees are going through in terms of their mental health.
Devshi, sorry, I think it was helpful. It's helpful also to say those EAP services are incredibly important, but I think kind of stepping closer to when people aren't at that point of needing counselling, there is a lot of work and initiatives and strategies that leaders can take on to ensure that they've actually got a mentally healthy workplace before it gets to the point of people. People will at times need to access counselling, but there's also strategies around workplaces ensuring they've got a psychologically safe workplace, that they've got a workplace that really prioritises wellbeing and models it in their leaders, as well as having counselling and EAP available for people that need that.
Okay, so moving on, since we already talked about the challenges leaders are facing, in promoting. So what are the strategies or initiatives leaders or employers can come up to support their own mental health? Do you think building resilience can help with that?
Yeah, look, I think in terms of initiatives, there are so many different things, and I, work with people from a range of different backgrounds around the sort of initiatives they can take. But let me kind of give you the three that I think are particularly important. So the first one I would say is about understanding yourself better as a person. So every person's unique, and I've worked with hundreds of leaders, and every story that leader has is different and unique. And some of the questions that's really important for individual people to consider is things like, what keeps you grounded? So when things are getting really busy and overwhelming, what keeps you grounded? What brings you joy? What energizes you? Other things that are important in terms of understanding yourself is, have you noticed what makes you feel de-energized or makes you feel heavier? What are those things? How can they be things that you can limit? What are some of the thoughts, though, in terms of understanding yourself? What are some of the thoughts you might have when something doesn't work out for you? What are the beliefs that you carry into those situations? What are some of your ways of bouncing back after a setback? So I guess a lot of those questions are around people really having a good understanding of themselves and what works for them and what doesn't work for them. The second thing, which is a really common theme that I notice with many leaders I've worked with, is that they can get very consumed in their head. So they're constantly thinking and processing and making decisions and planning. Will spend a lot of time, sitting in front of their computer. And the second initiative I would really highly recommend is getting out of your head and into your body. So many of the leaders that I work with, we work together to try and build movement into every day, and thinking about mindfulness, breathing, grounding exercises to get you out of your head and into your body, and taking regular breaks from your desk, from your screen, your computer. And I'm just going to take a moment now, because I think one of the things with podcasts is that you can listen to them and go, I must think about this. Yeah. But I'm going to stop for a minute and say, if you're listening now, and Ḓipshī, unfortunately, because you're the only person here that I'm talking to, to do this, I'm going to ask you to stop and take 3 slow, deep breaths in and out now. So I might get you to do this with me now. So really settling your feet on the floor, holding your hands really comfortably in your lap. If you're comfortable, closing your eyes. And now take 3 slow, deep breaths in and out. Fabulous. And the question for you after you do this, to the listeners and for you, Ḓipshī, is what are you noticing now about your body? You don't have to answer that, but just noticing what's happening in your body. And what is your body telling you that you need right now? Is it telling you you're thirsty, that you need to move, that you've got a sore neck? That, what does your body tell you right at this point? That you're tired and you need some more rest? Yeah. So that's just a really quick, simple strategy that leaders can schedule into their day at any point.
Yeah. So even when you talk about mindfulness, do you think mindfulness and emotional intelligence has a lot to do with mental health?
I think mindfulness is a skill that leaders can build, that anyone can build, and I think it has some very strong returns in terms of your mental health and well-being. So absolutely, yes. So I'm just going to come back to the question, because you were talking about the initiatives that leaders can take, and I'm really keen to give as much value for anyone who's listening. So the first thing I said was to understand yourself and your story better. The second thing was about getting out of your head and into your body. And then the third and fourth things, the third thing is being kind and compassionate to yourself, showing yourself self-compassion. One of the things that happens often with leaders that I work with is an overriding theme of perfectionism, wanting to have everything perfect before it's done, being quite harsh and critical about how well you're doing things. And one of the initiatives that can really help you in terms of your mental health and well-being is being kind to yourself, and the concept of being a friend to yourself. So how do you hold your own hand and look after yourself? That's incredibly important, particularly I think in the last couple of years where people have experienced situations that they haven't ever come up against before. How do you let go of being perfect, be kind, and look after yourself? So that's my third tip initiative. And the final one, which I think is absolutely critical, is where are your connections and support? Who's your tribe? Who supports your work? Do you have a coach or a mentor or an advisor? Who do you go to support you in maintaining and promoting your mental health and well-being so that you're the best you can be at home and in your workplace? And where are you getting support if you do experience mental ill health? So Dipsha, talked about the EAP program and also counselling that's offered. How do you go and seek help, and the importance of reaching out and seeking help if you're at the point where you need to get support for mental ill health? So they're my 4 things. Yeah. Do you reckon I should summarise them again, just the headlines?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so understanding yourself better, getting out of your head into your body and moving and mindfulness, being kind and compassionate to yourself, and being really clear about where your connections and support are.
I think having someone to confide in really helps when it comes to like dealing with some mental situation, right? Because like when you have someone whom you can talk to or reach out in terms of your like needs, so I think nothing is better than that. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting because the research around help seeking doesn't necessarily talk about whether your natural style is extroverted or introverted. It's about whether you have a view that you need to be able to manage this on your own, or whether you think it's okay to be vulnerable and reach out for help. So what I would say is that for people who are naturally quieter, what I notice is that they tend to reach out to those closest to them, that they still, introverts can still ask for help and reach out for help. It's not so much a function of introversion or extroversion. I think my observations are that it might be more of a function of whether you feel like it's okay to be vulnerable and ask for help.
That makes sense.
This is where workplaces and your team can have such an important role as well, in terms of noticing changes in behaviour, noticing, someone who might have become a bit more withdrawn, noticing that someone might be feeling like they need a bit more support.
Yeah. Having a good team, I think, is a boon for everyone. Like, absolutely, wherever we are working. So if the team we are in is supportive enough, then I think the problems get a little less. Yeah. Okay, so we are almost at the end of the episode. So last but not the least, would you like to share some more suggestions with our listeners?
Yes, absolutely. So given that we're recording this coming towards the end of 2021, what I'd like to do, because I have given some suggestions about initiatives earlier in the podcast, I'd like to invite listeners to take a moment to grab a piece of paper and a pen and write down these 3 words.
Okay.
Start, stop, and continue. And I'm going to invite you, whoever you are and whenever you happen to be listening to this podcast, to stop and think about, in terms of your mental health and well-being, when you think about your own unique situation, what are 3 things that would be helpful for you to start doing to promote your own mental health and well-being? They don't have to be big, huge, ambitious things. They can be something as little as turning your phone off for half an hour in the middle of the day and going for a walk. Something as little as breathing, doing that breathing exercise that we just practiced earlier on. So what are 3 things you're going to start doing to promote your mental health and well-being? And some of the questions that might help prompt that is, what brings you joy? What energizes you? What makes you feel good? The second thing is, what is something that you're going to stop doing that will help promote your mental health and well-being? And a way to focus in on that is to think about, what are the things that de-energize you, that might make you feel heavy, What are the things that you notice take you away from being happy and productive? And continue. What are 3 things or one thing that you're already doing that you think really benefits your mental health and well-being? And that's the thing that you're going to continue doing, or the 3 things you're going to continue doing. I find this exercise really helpful because it's a way of just stopping and reflecting, and you can use it at any time. It's really simple, easily accessible, and is unique to you. So there's a suggestion.
That's a great suggestion, because I also myself took up a pen and paper and I also started writing. Stop and
I love it.
Yeah, that's a really good exercise to do. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. So moving on. So tell us, if our listeners want to reach you, so how would they be able to?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I love connecting with people. It's one of the things that really drives me and I get a lot of joy out of in my work. So, if it has been an interesting conversation for you to listen to, please do reach out and connect with me. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. So, Swagata Bapat, and I'm assuming, Dipshy, that people can get that information from looking at the podcast. Great. So if you connect with me on LinkedIn, that's Swagata Bapat. And I also have a website, which is sbconsulting.com.au. And I'd love to chat with you or connect with you. If you want to do that, that would be lovely. I love hearing people's stories and connecting with people.
Okay, it was a great session, Swagata. Thank you so much for joining us today. And it was really insightful even for me, and I'm sure that for all our listeners as well. So I'm really hoping that you have a good day. Hope to
Fantastic.
Hope to connect with you soon again, maybe on a different topic this time.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks so much, and thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. It was great talking to you. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Vantage Fit Corporate Wellness Podcast. Please do subscribe to Vantage Fit Corporate Wellness Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and our YouTube channel for new episodes.